Let's go. Well, good morning, everybody. It's amazing to see everybody in person. It was a long time coming. So our first meeting with John. This is the September 8th, 2022 meeting of the Lower Downtown Design Review Commission, and I'll, for the first time in a year and a half, call the meeting to order. Okay, housekeeping items before we begin our discussion. Oh, hold on, sorry, that's my job. Not doing my job. So there we go, and then I do this, and yeah. So we're going to review the options for public comment. We are still hybrid, or we are hybrid still. We still are accommodating folks that are joining virtually. So the options for public comment, should you be joining virtually, if you're joining by computer, tablet, or smartphone, please select the hand raise option. Calling in by phone, you can either email landmark@denvergov.org with your name. The phone number you're using to call in, probably you would like to discuss, or you can dial *9 to show your raised. And then, of course, we have the availability for folks to participate in person here with us in the room. Correct. The new slide. Right. So because we have just moved to a hybrid format for the meeting, staff was kind enough to put together some tips for the virtual participants, should you have any technical issues. So if you are participating virtually, to mute or unmute, please click on the microphone icon, which is at the bottom of your screen, or typically at the bottom of your screen. And I'm going to clarify that it will be on the bottom of your screen if we unmute you or promote you to presenter. It's not there now. Okay, excellent. And then expanding the menu next to the microphone will reveal some additional options. Select your speaker and microphone devices. That allows you to test your microphone and speakers. Please be sure that your volume is turned up or down. I guess if that's not working, that is when you could switch to some other audio. If you downloaded Zoom on your desktop, laptop, tablet, or mobile device, clicking audio settings will bring you to the additional menus. It's also where you can run through a test for your speakers and microphones, and you can adjust your volume there as well. And the big one that we've heard from, so this is our first week of doing virtual meetings, and in this room, hybrid meetings in this room, we've heard from LCC attendees and probably planning board attendees, but verified there, that there was some background noise because when we shuffle papers or we type or something, it pops up for you all. So if you go into the audio settings and the background noise suppression, that helps a lot for those of you in the public who are having a hard time hearing. All right, and next, what we'd like to do is, before we get to the process itself, as before, we'll ask each commissioner to introduce yourself and provide your name and what position you serve on the commission. We'll go in alphabetical order, I guess. I will start. My name is Jane Whistler. I'm the preservation architect and chair. And so,
Tom Collett, general contractor.
Mike Coughlin, developer.
Andy Duncan, MP, preservation architect.
Fred Glick, property owner. Jim Grabner, resident.
John McIntyre, at large.
Sylvester Johnson, practicing architect. And just to let you all know, when we were virtual, everything that we did had to be a roll call vote. Now that we're back in person, we do unless we need to do it individually. So, we do not have on our agenda, we don't have any meeting records to approve this morning. And we also do not have any consent agenda items, so that brings us to our design review agenda. So, as usual, before we jump into that, we'll do a quick review of that process. Staff will begin by making a presentation, followed by questions by commissioners. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for his infill project, 15 minutes to make a presentation, either virtually or at the table here in person. And that will be followed by questions by the commissioners. At that point, members of the public are welcome to comment for up to 2 minutes each. And as a reminder, if you're joining by computer, tablet, or smartphone, select the hand raise option. And if you're by phone, use *9 to select that hand raise. And then if we have any public here in person, we'll be asking, or letting them know that they participate. Yeah. Following the public comment, staff can offer any clarifications if necessary. After that, excuse me, the commission will then go into deliberation and so with that, I'll go ahead and call the first item on the agenda, which is 2022 COA 379 1920 Market Street.
All right, that's going to be me today. I can get up to the podium if you want. I think I can project enough from here. Brittany had an emergency and was not able to be here. And I am not as familiar with this project as she is. So you guys get to ask a lot of questions, the applicant, not of me, because I don't have any answers to them. I'm going to do read through the staff report as best I can, the staff summary and our recommendation, try to make it as possible, but I do apologize that I'm not as familiar with the design details on this as I was of the staff report. So the applicant, Circle West Architects, is proposing a new one-story addition, rooftop addition to the 1920 Market Street, which was built in 1930, and a new 21-foot 6-inch tall side addition. So here's 1920 Market Street, the current configuration. Here is the proposed side addition. The rooftop is not necessarily visible here. The project scope will involve total demolition of the non-contributing building, which is formally 1926 Market Street, 39% demolition of the roof of 1920 Market Street, and demolition of the non-historic loading dock and interior walls to accommodate the new side addition. Due to the extent of the work, the commission will review the additions through a two-step process. So we've had the map form of context and now the design detail. So at the July 7, 2022 meeting of the LDDRC, the commission approved the rooftop proposed addition, limited to below 40% for the contributing building, and a new one-story rooftop addition to 1920 Market Street, and a new side addition to 1920 Market Street. The side addition will have the appearance of two stories in height while remaining subordinate to the historic warehouse buildings found on this block of Market Street. Large rooftop structure will be constructed atop the new side addition. Let's see, again, just flipping through slides, so I may be completely asynchronous here. The new rooftop addition on 1920 Market Street will be 1 story in height and clad in black brick. Let's see if I can find that. There we go. There's the rooftop addition. The front facade and alley elevation will have new steel windows with true divided light. Along the alley, the addition will have minimally cantilever over the historic addition. The applicant has proposed a soffit artwork piece that will have integrated LED illumination. If it's a true art piece, the commission purview is limited to the integrated lighting. If it doesn't classify this as a sign, however, it will need to return to the commission at a later date for your review. The new side addition will be glazed in a variety of materials. I will go back to this. So the new side addition will be clad in a variety of materials, depending on the elevation. So the front facade will be mostly operable storefront glazing with glass and steel framing and an extruded aluminum operable storefront system. The rooftop structure will also be clad in a black and steel, transitioning to a lighter white metal panel on the interior. The rooftop mechanical screen and second floor on the alley will be clad in flat metal wall panels in matte black, while the ground floor of the alley elevation will be a liquid brick Highlands with tumbled edges. A new concrete loading dock, which is here. Oh my gosh, my computer wants to restart, of course. Let's make that not happen. A new concrete loading dock will be constructed in front of both buildings. The new dock will have ADA access in front of the historic building and a new step of stairs to align with the new side addition entrance. The new loading dock will be 10 foot 6 inches wide, maintaining 10 feet 5 inches of sidewalk clearance in front of the dock. Other alterations to the historic building include removal of the existing awnings, replacement of the non-historic garage doors on the Market Street elevation with new aluminum clad wood window storefront, replacement of a non-historic man door with a new full light aluminum clad wood door, 2 additional door openings on the alley elevation with aluminum clad wood half light doors. The alley doors will have a simulated divided light with 1 panel below. On the north elevation, 2 historic window openings on the second floor will be infilled. You can see those here, where the openings need, 3 hours to restart. I can handle that. Will be infilled where the openings meet the new side addition. The rooftop mechanical will be located atop the rooftop structure. You can see that up here on the new side addition, and will be screened by the metal panel mechanical screen. Staff has evaluated the project and let me get to the bottom of the staff report. We're recommending, or make it for me to have read that first, approval with conditions. The red brick tumble edges on the alley elevation does not meet our requirements for non-tumbled edge brick because that is not a historic material. That is a false sense of history. In setting the historic window opening, infill at least 2 inches from the wall plane and preserving the historic brick sill in those locations. So the proposed additions will allow 1920 Market Street to remain visually prominent and is subordinate to the historic building and surrounding context. This 3-sided rooftop structure has been redesigned per commission comment and will be a permissible primary use. The proposed materials are typical of the surrounding context and new construction within the district, and therefore we're recommending conditional approval. I'm going to flip through real fast through some of these details, the doors, storefronts, the loading dock. Oh, here's the lighting for the alley, I think, and lighting elsewhere as well, and materials, and somewhat aerial view. Here's the lighting for a mural, and if you have any comments, I can't really answer much. Sorry.
If it's time for staff questions, should be. I want to do that. I do have one that I think is just a real simple clarification to Brittany's conditions. She's recommending the first condition of to not use red brick with a couple of edges on the alley elevation. I'm interpreting that as the red color is acceptable to staff. It's just tumbled edges that we have.
Correct. Okay. Yes. Tumbled edges.
It could be gray brick with tumbled edges if we still want it.
Correct. Yes. So red brick would be fine as long as it doesn't have tumbled edges. Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Absolutely.
How do we feel about reused historic brick?
Well, let me look real fast. This is kind of on the fly. My
experience has been it's appropriate and we're instilling, like the windows that we're instilling, it's appropriate to use that salvage brick. But when it's new construction, we're still in a tree.
Yeah. I'm a little bit confused, I have to admit. Maybe we can take this up with the applicant's representation. Because it seems to me from the drawings, I'm seeing it indicated that historic tumbled Highlands brick being used on the front facade as well. I'm not quite clear in what condition, because it does show that note on like page 34, for example.
I had the same question. I think we
That was my question. I was wondering if it was just a tag to say this is historic. I think it's good.
Original, yeah.
Because it shows up on the alley elevation.
And the side elevation facing the addition, that's not what
These are great questions for the applicant.
And it sounds like, we have reached that point. So,
Yeah, let me just, promote this gentleman. I think, is that with your team or is he with the team?
No, this is not a project.
No, I know, but just making sure, because I don't know who Seth is, and I think he's probably with this.
Oh,
project.
I see.
Just making sure you're not familiar with him. All right, I'm promoting Seth, as well, just in case you are part of this team. If not, then, don't accept the panelist request.
So while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and invite the applicant to unmute themselves, and we will have.
Good morning. Can you hear us?
Yep, just a second. Let me get all situated here.
And this is,
Oh, yes, you're right. Thank you.
so yeah, so you'll have 15 minutes to make a presentation. Yes, and feel free to respond to any of the questions that you heard us asking staff, and just please be sure to state your name and address for the record. Ready?
Yes, finally.
Good morning. This is Peter Koliopoulos with Circle West Architects. And I have Matt Runyon here as well, our client. Morning. And good morning, everyone. And super happy that you're all together. And sometime soon we'll be all together presenting in person. So thank you, Chair and Committee. And of course, thank Brittany and the staff for putting everything together and reviewing, what we proposed for, the project. So as an overview, we just echo what Brittany and his staff have recommended, of course. We've worked diligently with them to appropriate the design and hopefully respond to the committee's comments over the last meeting or so, respectively of some of the glass and glass detailing, of course, as well as the height and relationship of the second floor addition. And so just to get to the point a little bit on some of the clarifications that we heard or questions, the historic brick, if you will, on the 1920 building, what we refer to as the historic building, specifically on Market Street and most of the building is the existing brick. We're really not adding any new brick to that facade or elevation. We may be repairing or retrofitting some existing brick, but we're not adding any new brick that we can see. And as far as the brick comment from the condition from Brittany and the staff on the alley side, we're fine with that. We, as far what I mean specifically is revising the tumbled brick to the, I'll call it the non-tumbled brick. And we understand that. We originally wanted a more contrast between the textures of the brick and the metal to have more of a texture along that elevation, but we certainly understand the comment and from staff about that condition. So we're fine with that. If we need to revise from the tumble to non-tumble, we can address that correctly. And so we're super happy to present the concept and the articulation of the glass and detailing. I know we flipped through some of the details a little bit quickly, but we can address them. Can I who has control of the screen here? Do you guys or?
Let me know how you want me to move it.
Okay, if you want to go back to some of the glass detailing or plans, yeah. So these are the doors and windows in the historic building on 1920. So basically, we're addressing the door detailing to address more of a historic and capture that initial and original look and feel for that building. And then could flip over to the next sheet. Okay, very good. So this is the new addition with the glass addition. So you can see where we're articulating the glass and steel. If we go to the next sheet as well. Okay, here's our, this is the addition on the historic building. So one of the comments that came up a little while back was that the windows on the addition of the historic building should contrast the more historic buildings, windows, excuse me. So we developed, we're recommending a more horizontal, more of a modern feel in context to the historic windows. And this is the parapet detail. And then you can see the window is set back from the facade of the brick, one brick length of approximately 8 inches. We could keep clicking along here. Okay, very good. So here's our Market Street elevation for both the buildings. This is obviously focused more on the raised platform. You could see the main entry into the new addition centered on the glass doors. We have our ADA ramp to the right in front of 1920. We have the raised platform, all allowing full access to all the entries, on both buildings. And we could click along here. The next slide. Here's some of our lighting detailing, some of the specifics on the lighting that we're looking at. Next slide. Yeah. So on the glass addition, we have the lower, or where the doors are, if you will, that would be all clear, transparent glass. Then above, you could see what we've articulated is we'll still have the glass, clear glass. Then set back behind would be a translucent layer of glass that would have laminated linen on the backside. So there'd be a depth. What we're trying to achieve is a rich look and the depth of the upper glass, and have more of a texture feel with the illumination, and that's why we specified the laminated linen. And then we have the vertical articulation of the steel angles and plates running vertically, setting up a nice proportion, a vertical proportion throughout that glass facade. Next slide. And then these are obviously the various angles around the building. We could, next slide. Of course, here's the aerial. So you could see how we've handled the glass on the new addition and then set back the second floor addition, as well as the brick addition on the 1920, where I spoke earlier about the more the new windows that would have a horizontal expression to the right. Those were those windows on the right. Next slide. Yeah, and here's our famous alley elevation. And we're excited about the minimal cantilever and then introducing some artwork, within that space, within that soffit. And again, the windows on the alley elevation on the second floor addition are identical to the new windows facing Market Street, and on all of that brick addition. And then, of course, you can see the metal addition to the right on the new addition. Okay, very good. So that's an overview, and we're happy to hear about Brittany's staff's recommendations, and we're happy to address, those conditions. And Matt, I don't know if you wanted to say anything. Okay, very good. So, we're happy to answer or clarify any questions or comments that Chair and committee have for us.
Great, well, thank you for that presentation. And yes, are there any questions for the applicant? Fred?
I just have one question. The other condition about insetting the infill windows, it looked to me from the drawings like that sort of crosses the top of the addition, if that makes sense, so that it's in elevation. Yeah, so on the right-hand image there, they sit above the roof line and below the roof line of the addition. Does that present any, the insetting of that, does that present any issues in terms of building envelopes that you guys are concerned about?
No, not from a architectural or code standpoint, or from a sustainability standpoint as far as thermal. No, we've handled these types of infill details before, and they're relatively common for us in adaptive reuse. So that wall will be insulated on the inside as well. So we're very comfortable with, what we're recommending.
And you're comfortable with the conditions recommended, that the infill be inserted setback at 2 inches from the wall plane?
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
One question, a detailed one for the exterior lights on the rear of the building. Will those be bright enough that they will illuminate the entire alley with, and also interconnect so they shine the length of the alley as well?
Yeah, our technically speaking, our property line is just on the outside face of our building wall on the perimeter on the alley. So those lights that we're recommending and specifying are specifically to address the building itself and building access and illumination. But those lights aren't, we didn't specify or design the lighting to illuminate all the alley. No, I mean, there may be some overflow foot candles spreading out a little bit, into the alley from those lights, but specifically they're designed for the building itself.
That's been an issue, as you're probably well aware, in lower downtown, by providing dark spots for people to hide in or congregate in. And it may not be necessary for you to meet design guidelines, but it may be something that will have to be done later.
All right, well, we're happy to review that. We would consider that kind of outside of our purview, since that's off of our property. But if that's something that, we can address separately, together, we can look at that.
That's quite acceptable.
That may not be something that this applicant can solve with this, because there are a lot of other agencies that weigh in on that, and how much light spread can come over the property line. So that may not be something that can really be addressed. Right. It's a bigger citywide issue, I think.
I'm just interested in lower downtown.
Yep, I know. Any other questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Do we know if we have anyone from the public who would like to comment on that?
Well, the only people who are attending, who are not in the room, are now staff, so I'm guessing that's a no.
Like, we don't have any public comments. Great. Okay, so then we can go into deliberation.
And I'm gonna stop sharing, so just, I'm narrating for you all, but for them as well, so that they can see you all during your deliberation.
Again, thank you to the applicant. If we do have any questions that come up during our deliberations, we'll be sure to let you know and to ask, but I'll go ahead and open it up to you.
Generally, I think it's appropriate. I agree with the conditions that staff has laid out. I think that those are appropriate conditions. The applicant has maintained the approved format and context. All of the materials they're proposing are high quality. That with staff conditions, I think this is appropriate.
Agreed. Consideration of the detail on that front facade with the living glass and the double layered system. We discussed that last time, that it feels like they responded appropriately to them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like they've taken our discussions into account on the details and address.
Shall I make a motion?
Yes, please.
I move to conditionally approve application 2022 COA 379 for the Phase 2 design details at 1920 Market Street for design guidelines related to contributing buildings, new buildings, and all buildings. Design guidelines, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report with the following conditions. 1, do not use red brick with tumbled edges on the alley elevation. 2, insert historic window opening infill at least 2 inches from the wall front plane and preserve the historic brick sill.
Thank you, Brett. Is there a second?
I will second with a friendly amendment that we just strike the word red from the first condition. Just leave it as, use brick with couple edges.
Accepted.
So with that being accepted, then all those in favor of the proposed motion?
Madam Chair, before there's a vote, I just want the board to understand, based on this condition, do not use brick with tumbled edges on the alley elevation. What that means is so long as any brick without tumbled edges is proposed to staff, that would be approved. And I just want to make sure you are good with that broad condition.
Or you could rephrase to use red brick without tumbled edges, which would be more specific. Thank you, Adam. Point out.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. I will make a second friendly amendment to change the first condition of do not use red, or do not use. All right, use red brick without tumbled edges on the alley elevation.
Accepted.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you. Bring that up.
Okay, all those in favor of our amended proposal, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? The motion passes, and thank you again to the applicant. It's been good to see the evolution of this project. So,
Sorry, I'm narrating.
Just share or just turn your video on, and that should be the only thing you have to do with that computer.
Oh, you can't when I remote control. Let me stop remote controlling. All right, now try it. On the bottom right, left, sorry. There we go. You're on, and now I will.
Okay, so next item on our agenda is 2022 COA 377, 1709 Blake, and 1702 Watson Street. The addition phase 1 mass form.
Thanks. Okay, so here you can see on the left, the site for a new hotel proposed at 1709 Blake Street, as well as a new bridge at the alley connecting the proposed hotel to the existing contemporary structure at 1702
Wazee Street. The proposed 17th at Lake Hotel is an 8-story building at 85 feet tall with 2 basement levels of underground parking, access from the alley. On the right are photos of the existing conditions at the site and the surrounding area. So here you can see kind of an overview around the site, showing contributing buildings nearby. Design guideline 4.1.3.2 states that the LDBRC may grant an exception to a 55-foot height limit of up to an additional 30 feet under the following conditions. One of the requirements is the building must include residential uses in a minimum amount equal to the floor area over the 55-foot limit. These residential uses may be located anywhere in the building. The second requirement is the building must be in context. And the third requirement is that all other design guidelines for new construction shall apply to projects eligible for this 85-foot exception. So a 300-foot radius from the property includes 16 contributing buildings in the district. Of those, 4 are over 55 feet in height. The Oxford is the tallest building within the radius, documented at 72 feet. 1517 17th Street, the Barth Hotel, across 17th Street, adjacent to the site, is the next tallest building within that radius, documented at 65 feet tall. The proposed infill will have a hotel use and does meet Chapter 30 definitions of residential uses, which states that that shall mean any building or part of the building in which a person or group of persons are provided with sleeping accommodation. So here you can see at the bottom left the existing parcel, which is a parking lot. Looks like it's 2 parcels. We will need the zone lot to be verified. At the top right, you can see how the new proposed hotel will take over the 2 lots. So it does appear that a combined zone lot will need to be created. However, this is something that can potentially be reviewed in phase 2. So as you can see here at the overall building section, alterations for 1702 Wazee Street will be at the rear of the structure and will only involve attaching a rear bridge over the existing alleyway. The alterations to the rear facade will be subordinate to the original design, and the new bridge will be at least 15 feet above the alley. The applicant is proposing to add a lightweight glass canopy over an existing interior courtyard, also at 1702 Wazee, to provide for a year-long use. The 72.5-foot and 45-foot long modules along Lake Street, which you'll see in the next slide, are intended to hold that 55-foot data line of the district. However, as you can see here, you will see on Lake Street, they read as 6 stories instead of 4 stories, which does not meet guideline 4.14. This also occurs at the 17th Street facade where modules will read as 6 stories. There are an additional 2-story setback at the top, which will be 11 feet from Lake Street and 17th Street facades. Staff feels the building should read as no more than 6 stories in height, and front modules should read more as 4 stories to be more in context with the district. Of the contributing buildings in the district that are taller than that 55 feet, these buildings typically read no more than 4 to 5 stories in height, so staff would strongly encourage applicants to identify all historic buildings within the lower downtown that read as more than 4 to 5 stories in height and demonstrate compatibility with those structures. Additionally, the top 2 stories, like I said, are set back 11 feet, but according to guidelines should be set back 15 feet, including that 20-foot module you'll see on Lake Street. So here are some street sections. On the left, you can see Lake Street. On the right, 17th Street. At the Lake Street elevation, there is a new 2-story canopy proposed. However, staff does not feel it creates a comfortable pedestrian environment as it is 2 stories in height and does not match other canopies found in the historic district. So here's the proposed building along Lake Street. It will be rectilinear and blocky in nature, and the facade features modulation that breaks up the mass of the building to create a width of building design that is typical of the district. As you can see, the facade will have the appearance of the 172.5-foot long module and one 45-foot long module. And as you can see, they appear approximately 6 stories in nature, rather than that 4 to 5 that I mentioned that's recommended by the guidelines. There will also be a 12.5-foot zipper, which you can see, as well as that 20-foot long module that's set back 11 feet from Lake Street, which is adjacent to 1725 Lake Street. The building segment will exceed that, will exceed 100 feet. So here you can also see again, this is on 17th Street, the building broken up into distinct modules again, very similar to Lake Street. One will be 37.5 feet long, one 75 feet long with another 12.5 foot kind of zipper that will design that on. And then here, the rear is kind of side elevations. The north sidewall elevation next to 1725 Lake Street and the rear alley elevation have not been fully developed at this time. Additional details on the size and proportion of all openings on all elevations should be provided. Finally, the articulation of the interior courtyard is also unknown to staff. However, these elevations will not be visible from the public right of way. So here's a compatibility demonstration. The facades will, design will include vertical elements and other architectural features that have been inspired by the district context. For example, bays of windows grouped together vertically. The windows and doors are clearly delineated in a modern way that relates to the district context. The window expressions on Lake Street on the smaller module will relate to various proportions on the Bars Hotel, and the windows appear to be recessed and will have vertical openings on the end. So here's some isometrics for the proposal showing the 17th Street elevation. Per design guideline 5.12, buildings located on corners at the intersection of streets shall emphasize the corner. Staff has concerns that the inset ground floor at the corner of 17th Street, Lake Street does not do enough to emphasize the corner of the building. The floor-to-floor heights are not within the recommended expression for the district per design guideline 5.13. The ground floor is 14 feet in height, meeting that minimum recommendation. However, the upper floors are 10 feet in height, below the minimum recommendation. The reduced floor-to-floor height allows for additional floors. However, the guidelines recommend an 85-foot building have an appearance of 6 stories, and staff would recommend a restudy of the floor-to-floor heights to be more in context with the appearance of 6 stories. So here is the Lake Street elevation, isometric. Street level windows at the corner and the 20-foot module are glassy and go all the way down to the ground. They do not appear to have a storefront design or industrial divided light design, which is not characteristic of the district. Some of the proposed balconies are placed, as you can see, at that 20-foot module below 55 feet on the primary facade, including Juliet balconies that appear to be on that larger module facing off Lake Street. So the design does meet some design guidelines. It does not meet 4.14, 5.12, 5.13, 5.2.1, 5.3.2, and 5.3.3. The proposed 86-foot, 6-inch tall infill building reads has more than 6 stories, has atypical floor-to-floor heights, as well as balconies below that 55-foot height limit. Therefore, staff is recommending denial.
Crystal, do we commissioners have questions for staff? Then we'd like to go ahead and invite the applicant. And we will be all in person.
Is it all right to sit down?
Absolutely, yeah, we're figuring this out ourselves, so.
Do you want to have them speak at the?
So you're welcome to either use the phone.
I think we'd like to do this, just sit here, if that's all right.
I think we just want to make sure there are no microphones, so please project.
Okay, I'm not speaking loud enough.
Yeah, and then,
I know when to move slides.
yeah, and
All right.
just so you know, also, this will be a 15-minute, so you'll have up to 15 minutes to present. And again, feel free to respond to any of the comments in the staff report or provide any questions, but, and just make sure to state your name.
My name is Chris Shears, Shears Acting Sophomore, 1550 Lakeview. With me is Daniel Raffy, who's the project designer of the project. Also here, the Nichols Partnership, are Melissa Rummel and Brian Rickey, sitting back here. Certainly answer questions regarding the development of the project. Thank you, Crystal, for your review and for the help that you've given us in the last few weeks. This is, I think a lot of you understand, a very unique project. And I want to give you just a little bit of background, although I could speak for a long time about that. The Mayor residence, known really fondly in Lower Downtown, as the Red House. This is the red sandstone. This, by the way, is Indian limestone, whereas in India, it was designed by Jim Olson of Olson Sunbury, the Seattle firm that I think a lot of you are familiar with. Completed in 1997. It's hard to believe it is 25 years old. It's weathered well, and I think in another 15 years it will be probably eligible for historic status, landmark status. It was designed as a downtown residence for the mayor family, for Jan, the mayor. And they, for those of you who've been in Lower Downtown a long time, you know that they were really some of the first residents and permanent residents, and they contributed a great deal to downtown and also to the Denver Art Museum's collection. The home was designed to be an art gallery as well as a residence, and it's absolutely remarkable on the inside. And I think Tom was involved in some of the construction, so he's been on the inside of this residence, and he understands how important it is. Tony Mayer, their son, recently approached Randy Nichols to discuss the development of the project, or of the adjacent property, and was interested in combining the Red House with the property in 17th Place, which we all know is one of those last great puzzles in Lower Downtown. Randy then recruited Parapet Resort, an extraordinary resort developer that specializes in historic properties and adaptive reuse. And they have properties all over the world. One of them happens to be the Jerome Hotel in Aspen, I'm sure all of you. So they would be the flag, the operator of the hotel. So that's a little background. There's a lot more to that. And I can speak more about that as you like. But what's important is to talk, I think, about the project that we're proposing. And I think I'd like to limit that to comments regarding the staff report, assuming that you've all done your homework. Regarding the floor-to-floor heights, which we just mentioned by Crystal, reading is 8 stories rather than 6. There are 2 of our previous projects in Lower Downtown, one the Maven Hotel and the other the hotel on Blake Street, which was processed through this board, I think, in 2019. And with both of those projects, this board approved 8 stories, mostly because hotels don't require the floor-to-floor heights that Lower Downtown suggests. And in the case of this project, it's important to have those 8 floors in order to reach that threshold that allows the hotel to be feasible. So this is why we're proposing that. And of course, we, with that experience, assumed that the 8 floors would be acceptable to this board because they're acceptable in previous reviews. Regarding the upper story setback, this is a little complicated, but once again, consistent with the approval of another project, which was the Blake Street Hotel, It was then staff's determination that setbacks between 55 and 85 feet don't require a specific setback, i.e. the 15 feet, and that an 11-foot setback meets the intent of the setback language. A couple of you may have been on the board at that time and remember that. So that project was approved with an 11-foot setback. Jen, you may remember that. Brittany, I think, was the case manager, and a lot's happened in all this the last couple of years, and we've forgotten a lot. So this is why we were so bold as to suggest that 11 feet was acceptable. And I think it does meet the intent, because the intent really is that there is a step back and that the upper two floors are distinguished. We agree with staff's comments regarding the corner and the two-level canopy, the second level canopy, the balconies below 55 feet. Certainly agree with that. And further development of the alley and courtyard elevations. And of course, at the concept level, we're just getting started. Our definition of concept is that it's exactly that, and we get an early read from you about the fundamental mass form and textual issues associated with the building. So we were a bit surprised that staff had requested denial based on that 4-4 height issue and the step back dimensions because of the precedence. But understanding that history and those decisions a few years ago were not really understood. So we would obviously prefer that you approve concept at this meeting today so that we can move ahead and proceed with schematic design, incorporating the adjustments proposed by staff. One thing I would like to mention is that we have not yet met with the county district, and we intend to actually have a meeting on the 28th. We usually do that, and we just, frankly, I take full responsibility for not meeting with them before this hearing. So they have, I think, agreed with the denial, and I've discussed that with them, and we've arranged for a meeting on the 28th. But we have a very long, great relationship with the downtown district. I'm the former chairman of the board of that district organization, and we have a pretty good record of working with them on the projects that we've done. So from this point on, we will be working intimately with them and making them aware of every move that we make. So we're very pleased to begin this process with this board and look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the applicant?
Clarify something. The currently exterior courtyard that's proposed to become interior, that falls within the remit now because it's exterior, but then it will become interior, which would take it out of. I don't know.
That's correct.
So does it fall within our remit or not? I'm kind of.
I mean, a new structure over it, so I guess that would fall. Because it's moving currently, and that's the red house. 17.
But if we approved the canopy, that would then remove the elevations within the courtyard from our. And you see what I'm asking?
It would become forced.
Yes.
It doesn't-
Yeah, interior.
It feels like if we're going to, if we're headed toward approving at some point today or at a later meeting, the canopy, I'm just not sure that we need to review the elevations if that's the direction that we're headed.
Of the interior of the red house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, I don't think you need to,
I want to make sure the applicant's not, the applicant mentioned producing those exterior, those elevations that I just want to make sure.
Well, there's two courtyards, so I guess to clarify, 1702 Wubby has a current interior courtyard. This new proposal for this structure will also have a courtyard, but that will stay exterior, so you will need to review those.
That's how I was taking it too.
Okay.
Yeah, different regards.
Just making sure. I
Yes, but no.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Can I also just add a note that there was a proposal that was reviewed in 2016, approximately 6 years ago, that did receive conditional approval that was similar to this, not exactly the same. However, there was no formal approval of COA issued. They didn't ever meet the conditions, so that approval has expired.
Actually, it hasn't expired at the time, it's still open. Okay.
That's right.
Well, Jenna, she worked on it.
Yeah, so, sorry. It's still open, and it's still in my queue, and looks like I'm 6 years late on a project review, which is delightful.
Doctor, your day.
I know, right? But yeah, when we have the conditions, when there's a conditional approval and the conditions have not been met and it's just open, it's open in perpetuity until they meet this condition. If the project changes, like this one has, it comes back to you and becomes a new project. So that's why, yeah, I know, it's fun. Any questions for the
I have a brief question. It probably doesn't amount to much, but on page 45, I'm looking at the rendering, and it looks like the corner is eroded, and it's not reflecting the floor plans, and I'm wondering if that's still something that could be resolved. Yeah, I'm looking at the far right side. It looks like the building comes to a corner, but then there's like a balcony area, like
We're missing reasons or,
I didn't know if it's something in the rendering, because the plan shows floor plate comes to a corner, and it, yeah, it's, to me, it's the way that the rendering shows up, it approaches the corner kind of interesting, but the floor plan it just comes to a complete corner. So I didn't know which direction you were going.
Yeah, I think it's probably the read of the rendering in the top left corner. The glass is intended to be a sort of structural butt joint, so that it's a minimalized corner. The plan read probably has that line shown a little heavy, so it looks more solid. The intent is to make that corner classy, but not.
Okay, I was
You've
curious.
done your homework, that's impressive. You saw that detail. I think one of the difficulties with the concept of views, you never know how far to go, in terms of the drawing.
Exactly.
And all that, and there certainly are some of those discrepancies in this presentation, but thanks for pointing that out.
Just for some clarification, I think you said, Chris, that you, applicant agrees with removal of balconies below 55 feet. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then also you agreed that there needs to be potentially more emphasis on the corner and ground level. That's what you were saying?
That's right. In fact, there'll be an awful lot of development of that by the time you see it next. One thing I want to mention, speaking is that, and this is important, we have made a commitment to very lightly touch the rest inside of the house. And I left that out of my presentation. I missed a paragraph. That's extremely important because Jan Mayers is still alive. She lives in Southland most of the time. And I had a discussion one-on-one with her about her home. The great of you who left a home that she's lived in for a long time, it's an emotional experience. And I assured her that we would approach this with a very light touch. She said, Chris, I know we will. And I say that because, as Tom knows, this is a very important building. We're going to be very careful.
Question for the applicant. Thank you very much for the presentation. As usual, if more questions come up, we'll be sure to let you know. Do we have any public?
There's no members of the public. I just wanted to put that on the record. Close the presentation so you all can discuss. And, well, there are no members of the public, so if you guys want to have me pull the slides back up, let me know.
Yeah, but we can go ahead and deliberate, so I'll add them to the group.
Of course, I come up with a question after we finish the question. This is the question for staff. One of the requirements is to maintain a certain floor to floor height? Is that the appearance of a floor to floor height from the exterior, or is it the actual floor to floor height?
Your project says. It is, yeah.
The
It
appearance.
just says it should look this way, but you can go up to the height.
Okay, because I think that was something that may be something we would deliberate. Because I understand one side needing to meet their performa and the other side may need to meet design guidelines. So I just wanted to.
You know, it seems like the sixth floor, 6-story, 8-story is kind of a primary question. We have approved 6-story, 8-story. It has been addressed in design detailing more than anything else, which I presume is going to be explored a lot more carefully as we move forward. I recall the other hotel that we worked on that's similar in terms of massing and setback that I think you were referring to, Chris, where there was detailing on the way that you grouped windows that are on adjacent floors in some cases to create, you know, more of a compatible appearance or flow with 4-story front and 6-story in total. So I don't object to that in principle. I think that's something we have successfully worked with applicants on in detail.
So to build on your comment, Mike, since that's kind of a tripping issue at the moment, and I'm just kind of thinking out ahead, would this proposal then be, you know, we're not conceptually opposed to the number of stories, but the current look of the number of stories is problematic. So would it be cleaner to do a denial in this case, say, hey, this is what we're looking for in the look. We're okay with number of floors, but the look is what we have concerns with in format and scale.
I mean, this is always the rub.
Yeah, that's the rub.
What's the detail, what's form and mass? I mean, my personal belief is form and mass is about size and, you know, it's a bigger picture. If you look at page 45 and 45, like, for example, there's this smaller building that's 3 stories, but it's kind of grouped. The top 2 floors are sort of grouped in a setting that creates different detail on floor to floor preference. So I don't know. I mean, I agree with the applicant's sort of challenge, which is how detailed do we need to get in form and mass, and how much can we tackle in detail?
I agree with that, but we typically kind of also look at the pattern and the size of fenestration as part of form and mass. And I think that where I am struggling with this, in general, I think that I agree with staff's recommendation of denial for Andy's point that I think it will be cleaner. I think that we're going to have a hard time coming up with very specific conditions that the applicant can address in order to have a conditional approval, which is why I think that the cleaner path is probably going to be denial. Where I am struggling with is I think, you know, I think that the 85-foot height is appropriate. What I'm struggling with a little bit is I do think that it's not reading as the 6 stories as well as it could be. You know, I'm very familiar with something within that is proportionally is doing a better job than this current proposal to read as 6 stories instead of 8. I think where I am struggling with it the most, you know, I agree with Steph's comments about the corner. I feel like that needs to be a little bit more grounded and needs to be more emphasis on the corner. I agree with Steph's comments about the really high canopy, Clay Street. I feel like that's totally inappropriate. What I am struggling with the most is looking at the Lake Street elevation on page 32 of 45. Is that, you know, as you kind of get further into the packet, they have a lot of references as to where they're applying proportions of the windows and the openings and fenestrations from. Where I am struggling with a lot is that as I am looking at how these floors visually align along this street elevation, they feel completely disconnected to me. And that's where I'm having some heartburn with the proportion, and I feel like those things could be shifted a little bit and adjusted in where and how those fenestrations are made to be a little bit more symbiotic with the rest of that elevation and the surrounding context, and get a little closer to that appearance of 6 stories.
I'm probably less bothered by the fenestration and the alignment than others, but I do think that particularly, the corner is particularly important. And the applicant said that they're gonna restudy that. I mean, I don't really see a path to approval today, just because I think the applicant has also said they've got more work to do on a bunch of this. So I think it's a fairly friendly denial, but I don't really see a way to construct an approval.
I don't know if this is like record of our comments or not, but I think to be helpful to the applicant, it's perhaps the feedback that there's no objection in principle to 8 floors, 6 floors, you know, the planned program here for this property essentially. You know, I think that's pretty key feedback. So that as you detail it, at least you know that there's not an objection to the program density and the number of floors shown.
And I'd add the setback personally as well. I have the same opinion in my mind. I have no problem with the number of floors, with the heights, with the stepping, and I think the setback is sufficiently deep that it's providing the articulation that's required for this massive left-hand precedent for that. I would agree. I think the other thing to add is the sort of animation of the streetscape. I definitely appreciate that, but I also think maybe in looking at that corner and in the pattern of fenestration, maybe 2 different strategies for the 2 different masses, to even add a little bit more of that kind of dynamic play of form and mass along the street, which I think is another part of the character of this, you know, part of the city as well. And maybe the approach to achieve something closer to a 6-story reading might vary between the 2 blocks, and maybe something to do with the articulation of that corner element as well. So I can see, I think it's, you know, that sense of pattern and number of floors is very apparent, particularly within the you know, the second mass in from 17th, based on its articulation as a pure grid. I wonder if some version of a double order at one location in that mass or some other play might help with the animation and also sort of mitigate this number of floor count that we're all, I think, reacting to, just based on the fact that it's a very pure version of a grid in that bay. And maybe just a little play within that would get us there in terms of massing articulation. I think that's kind of a detail element, but it's also kind of a articulation element.
Yeah, I mean, my view of it is I think that a little bit more study of the pattern of fenestration and how, you know, maybe some of those stacked, maybe some of those combined to address the appearance of 6 stories would kind of solve that. But because that pattern of fenestration is typically lumped into form and scale, as well as, you know, looking at the corner again, some of those things. I mean, I don't feel like unless we design it for them, which is not our job, you know, I don't feel like we could come to a clean additional approval on this personally. I think that kind of the general approach of having pieces set back, be read as mostly glassy and kind of as zippers, as Crystal called them, in between the larger masonry masses, is an appropriate approach on that. Yeah.
And I would have to say personally as well that it does feel to me like the main issue there exists, and now take this as you will, but on that larger second mass and on Blake, it does feel like the kind of vertical portion of the elevational bay at the alley on 17th feels appropriate. The kind of narrowness of that is working well for, I think, in terms of proportion. So again, these are probably just like comments relative to maybe massing articulation, but I guess in my mind, the main issue may be with that middle, you know, the middle block on Blake Street in relationship to the balance of the streetscape, and just it's kind of, you know, slightly square. Just
Yeah, and I agree with what others have said. I think it is appropriate to look at solid versus void and amount of context. Middle and yeah, well, I think there are many things that are very positive and consistent with our guidelines. I think it's the appearance of 6 versus 4 floors and how, in particular, at the street level, building is relating to, you know, where we have so many storefronts and other spaces that really activate the street. I think those are the two areas for people.
We ready for? I move to deny application 2022 COA 377, new infill structure and alley alterations from 1702 Wazee Street and 1709 Lake Street as per design guidelines 4.1.3.3, 4.1.4, 5.1.2, 5.1.3, 5.2.1, 5.2.2, 5.3.2, 5.3.3, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Second. Jim, second. Are there any amendments? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes for abstaining. Any abstention? Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have any abstention? Yes. The motion passes to deny the application. And I think we look forward to working with that and others.
Thank you. It's nice that everybody's together.
Well, that takes us to the end of our agenda. So, business or discussion? Otherwise, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. 9:43.